This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states or situations.
Bored with your boring cardio? Stop pedaling that snooze cycle to Nowheresville and try some cardio that's actually fun. Supernatural Fitness, available on MetaQuest. Isn't that right, Jane Fonda?
Cardio will never be boring again.
Sweat to the beat of thousands of chart-topping songs inside stunning virtual landscapes.
Bet your stationary bike can't do that.
Visit GetSupernatural.com and join the next fitness revolution. Supernatural VR Fitness, only on MetaQuest. Rated T for Teen.
Welcome to Dear Prudence. I'm your guest, Prudence Kristen Meinzer. I host a couple of other podcasts, including Buy the Book and How to Be Fine. Be sure to check those out if you love self-help books, hate self-help books, or want advice on how to be okay-ish rather than perfect. Today, we'll be answering your questions about secretly contributing to kids' college funds, asking a friend to apologize for their internalized fatphobia, and resolving a massive fight with a stepchild. Here to help me out today is the great Anne Helen Petersen. Oh my gosh, Anne Helen Petersen. I am so excited to have you here today. You are a culture writer and author of several books, the latest called Out of Office, The Big Problem and Bigger Promise of Working from Home. You're also the author of a fantastic Substack that everyone should definitely follow called Culture Study. And you also host a podcast under the same name, Culture Study. Anne, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited too. And I feel like, is this our first time sharing the mic together? And in my mind, we have, but maybe we never have before.
No, that's totally, I felt the same way. And, some of it is just like, when you do book publicity, you're like, you do so many podcasts, but then you're like, I feel like we have shared the mic. I feel like we should like search our names together.
We have to do a search. Yeah. You and I just run in so many of the same circles.
Yeah.
We're both culture critics and so on. So I feel like, anyhow, we'll figure that out off mic. Listeners, you don't have to hear us do that. Instead, let's just ask you, Anne, one piece of unsolicited advice for you to share with the listeners. We ask all of our guests to share. Doesn't have to be big. It can be small. Anything you like. Unsolicited advice.
Oh, I'm so into like practical stuff. I live on an island. We lose power somewhat often. We sometimes like I go days, weeks without the car ferry operating. So I'm very into preparedness, not like bunker style, but just like having stuff. And one thing that I recommend everyone have is it like they have this new thing in the world that I feel like not enough people know about. And maybe it's like not enough dads have learned about it for it to become a standard dad gift. But it's a battery that you charge and then you keep in your car. And not only can you plug like, I don't know, devices into it, but it can jump your car for you. It makes jumping your car possible without another car.
That's incredible. I've never heard of such a thing.
And wow. I know. See, you didn't know. So it's basically like battery car jumper situation. And you charge it once a year. You bring it in, like you put a thing on your calendar that's like, okay, bring in your battery and recharge it. But then otherwise it just stays in your glove compartment.
What? It fits in a glove compartment?
Yeah, no, it's just a tiny thing. It's like, I don't know, the size of like a big wallet, a little thicker.
Wow.
And I've used it not only for my own car, but then also in situations where someone flags you down and is like, oh, can you jump my car? And, it's just kind of like, it's sometimes an iffy situation, connecting your car, the electricity of your car to someone else's car. And like, where do I park the car? Like, it just gets awkward. It's a lot easier just to be like, oh, use my battery powered jumper cables on your own car. So This is my piece of unsolicited advice.
I love that piece of unsolicited advice. It's just so practical. And in a lot of the climates where a lot of our listeners are right now, this is going to come in handy right now.
Yes.
It just happens all the time.
Totally.
always when you need some car to come along and it's cold and people are all at their holiday gatherings or whatnot, they're not driving by when you need them. Now is the time to have your own magic battery. Magic battery the size of a wallet.
And it's not like prohibitively expensive. Like it's very like normal price. So yes, check it out.
Nice. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for that, Anne. We're going to take a quick break now, but when we're back, we'll dive into all your listener questions.
When you hear a good idea, it's natural to do a double take. That's what you might do when you hear Discover will automatically double the cash back you've earned on your credit card at the end of your first year with Cashback Match. Wait, what? Yep, double the cash back is something so good you might do a triple take. It pays to Discover. See terms at discover.com/creditcard.
Planning any exciting trips this year? Something you might not be planning is learning the local language. Well, with Babbel, you only need a few weeks to learn. This year, speak like a whole new you with Babbel, the language learning app that gets you talking. Babbel's quick 10-minute lessons, handcrafted by over 200 language experts, get you to begin speaking your new language in 3 weeks, or whatever pace you choose. Babbel is designed using practical, real-world conversations, so you'll be ready to talk wherever you go. Babbel is such an amazing tool if you're looking for ways to improve real-life conversation, not just the stuff you might find in a textbook. And with Babbel's speech recognition technology, you can even hone your pronunciation and your accent, just like you're sitting with a language teacher in real life. With over 16 million subscriptions sold, Babbel's 14 award-winning language courses are backed by a 20-day money-back guarantee. So this year, get talking with Babbel. Let's get more of you talking in a new language. Babbel is gifting our listeners 60% off subscriptions at babbel.com/Prudie. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/Prudie. Spelled BABBEL.com/Prudie. Babbel.com/Prudie. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Welcome back. You're listening to Dear Prudence. I'm Kristen Meinzer, and I am here with Anne Helen Petersen. Let's get started with our first letter of the day, titled Money and Secrets.
My husband died 6 years ago. We never had children, and we were on the fence about it when he died. His sister, Dee, was a right-wing holy roller who thinks uncontrolled reproduction is duty to God. Needless to say, we never really got along. She hated everything about me. Agnostic, educated, and we had cats, and we were really loud about it. At my husband's funeral, she announced to the room what a tragedy it was that her brother never had kids. She called it a waste of his life. She said that looking right at me. In contrast, my sister-in-law, M, married to the other brother, was my rock. She helped me clean out the house and ready it for sale, and we're still close today. My husband made investments that mean I will never have to worry about money. I work because I want to, not because I have to. And now I want to help M pay for her kids when it's time to go to college. Her oldest is 16. However, I will burn it all in a pit before Dee gets a dime. She poisoned an attempt I made at being a good aunt, so I have almost no relationship with her brood. If I make an offer to M, she will tell her husband and it will get back to his mother. She is a woman of many virtues, but discretion is not one. I don't want to start a family feud here. What are the steps I need to take?
Well, first of all, letter writer, I am so sorry about the death of your husband. I'm sorry you had to deal with Dee being terrible to you during that. You sound like a truly lovely person. I love your generous spirit. I love that you want to help M's kids out. But I'm just going to say this right here and now. This will not stay a secret. Let's not even give advice on how to keep it a secret because we cannot control other people's mouths. There are other things we can control, but I'm just going to say anytime someone says like, this is just between us, and we know there are loudmouths in the family, it's going to get out. It's not possible to keep it a secret. But I have other advice for you, and I know you have other advice. Let me get your initial thoughts, Anne.
I think she does want to start a family feud.
Ah!
I mean, I don't think she wants it to like turn into like a giant kerfluffle where everyone is so angry at each other. But I do think that she wants the Holy Roller Sister to know how much she hurt her, right? Like hurt her while her husband was living and also hurt her particularly when her husband died. And I think that she also legitimately wants to show kindness to to the nieces here and to do something that will make their lives easier in a meaningful way. And to me, the easiest way to do that is you set up a trust so that no complications can make it so that that money doesn't go to the education, right? Like that's a pretty straightforward way to direct
So it
that
doesn't
money.
get contested, so nobody can fight over it. Yeah.
Yes. And then the way that other people react, whether that's your mother-in-law or your sister-in-law, the other sister-in-law, it's none of your business. It doesn't matter to you. It doesn't change the act of generosity that you have chosen for this. Like, I think you can't control how other people are going to react to this. So you have to decide, do I want to do this generous thing for my nieces?
Yeah, yeah. And I love that your take is maybe she kind of does want to start a feud. Maybe that's true. Let her write her, you know in your heart what you really want. But as I was saying earlier, this isn't going to be a secret. You can try your best to keep a secret. Secrets just are never kept in families or in general, in circles of friends and communities. Secrets get out. So I would encourage you to just be at peace. Either be at peace with I'm starting a feud or be at peace with people are going to talk and I have to accept that they are going to talk. I can't control their yammering. They're going to do what they're going to do. So find a way to make peace with that or even to revel in it and have joy in the fact that they're going to be, talking. And then, I second what you just said, Anne, about creating a trust for M's kids. That way it's legally protected. That way it's going straight to the thing you want it to go to their college fund. And then later on, I also am going to suggest something that you can take it or leave. You don't have to do this if you don't want to. But if it's in your heart that you do at some point want to get to know Dee's kids, or if it so happens that you just happen to get to know them through the other nieces and nephews, and you decide, you know what, I don't want these kids to be left out, you can also create a trust for those kids down the road to help them pay off their college debts or whatnot. You can do that and have not one single red penny go to Dee. You can have that money protected and Dee will never see any of it. You can set things up legally so that is the case. So, just a future option to have available to you. Should you want to do it, take it or leave it. But you can do this. You can help the nieces and nephews you want to. And you don't ever have to worry about Dee getting any of the money. You don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, who's like curiously absent from this question is the husband. And I wonder if it might take some, like it might be worth thinking too. What would my husband, if he were still alive, like how would he feel? How would he feel about how his sister has acted towards me, towards us, right? Like, do you think he would be angry and feel protective of me and of us and our decisions and the life that we made together? And I like, it's okay to be really angry at the way that this person hurt you in your grief, right? Like that's why it's sticking with her. That's why she's still thinking about this and how if she gives money to the other nieces, it will have ramifications. And so I think like giving yourself a little bit of permission to be really angry about that and to feel that anger and understand it as righteous too.
Yeah.
I
think our society frequently tells people that anger is not a healthy emotion, that we should try to get past it, that we should try to forgive. I'm just going to say something here and now that's very controversial that I've said on a lot of my other podcasts. I think anger is healthy, and I think that forgiveness is overrated. I think that we are asked to forgive a lot of stuff that we shouldn't have to forgive. We don't have to absolve people who are mean to us. We don't have to say all is forgotten to people who literally at your husband's funeral made you feel like shit. You don't have to do that. You can say, I'm making my peace the way I want to, but no, I'm not letting you off the hook and I'm not forgiving you. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. You can be angry about this and you can enjoy that anger. And it's not going to ruin your life.
Yeah.
I
No,
know
it's
some
not
people
gonna
also
ruin
say
your
like,
life.
oh, if you're angry, you're just punishing yourself. No, you're actually possibly rewarding yourself and letting yourself feel the things you need to feel.
Yeah, and there's always a fine line, right, between like letting anger consume you, right? Like if this is something that you wake up every day and you think about that bitch, what's her name? If you think about
D.
like that
D.
bitch D, right? That would be something that I would want to work through in therapy, that I would want to talk to other people about. Like, okay, what is this actually? Is this also about like how society maybe judge some of my choices? Like, why is this so incredibly hurtful and I cannot let it go? But if you're just kind of like, I'm not letting that bitch D get any of this money. And this will help ensure that. And maybe this will put a little bit of a cherry on top. Like, go for it.
Yeah.
It's great.
Absolutely. We're giving you permission to do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. And let's get to our next letter. This letter is titled Fat and Furious at Indirect Invectives.
I've been close friends with my friend Benji for almost 15 years over long distance. We've supported each other through big life events. He was my best man, and I stood by him during the loss of his father to cancer. However, things have become complicated since he started dating Mac, who we met a couple of years ago. At first, their relationship seemed casual, but it quickly became serious, and I noticed red flags early on. When I pointed them out, Benji often agreed that Mac had problematic beliefs. Mac exhibited controlling behaviors, like pressuring Benji to go to the gym, reading his private messages, and even buying a gun when Benji expressed discomfort around guns. Their relationship involved constant fighting, and Mac would make cruel threats, including revealing Benji's nudes to family and friends or taking his car keys and glasses to keep him from leaving. Despite this, Benji remained in the relationship, even when I suggested he leave. It was hard for me to watch him endure abuse, but ultimately, after a trip to visit family, Benji began the slow process of breaking up with Mac, even though he had recently moved into an apartment Mac bought and Mac was technically his landlord. Yes, long story. I visited him right after he started that process to show solidarity, be there for him, and catch up. But I made it clear I didn't want to see Mac. I guessed correctly that he'd said fatphobic things about me throughout their relationship, and I insisted I didn't want to exchange pleasantries with someone who hated me like that. Benji told me he'd called me a, quote, sorry fat fuck when he learned I didn't want to have lunch. During the trip, I learned Mac had started monitoring Benji using cameras he'd installed outside the apartment and location tracking through his phone. We convinced Benji to move out of the apartment and cut ties with Mac as soon as possible, giving his controlling behaviors and constant harassing texts he'd send Benji. He agreed, though financially he wasn't sure when he could leave. Here's where I need advice. I'm struggling with the fact that Benji tolerated Mac's insults about me for so long. While I know abusive relationships are complicated, it hurts that Benji didn't stand up for me, especially when Mac was consistently cruel. I worked hard to overcome my own fat phobia, and it stings that Benji allowed someone to say horrible things about me without doing anything. A couple months ago, Benji retweeted something I found fatphobic. When I pointed it out, he didn't apologize, though he did delete the tweet. Now I'm worried he might react similarly if I bring up how hurtful his tolerance of Mac's behavior has been. I don't want to seem like I'm punishing him, but it's hard to move past the hurt. Should I wait for more time to pass before addressing this, or am I being overly sensitive? How do I have this conversation without pushing him away or unnecessarily litigating the past?
Oof. Well, letter writer, first of all, Benji is very lucky to have you as a friend. Having somebody that you can trust and lean on to help extricate you from an abusive relationship, it's an incredible thing, and not everybody in abusive relationships has somebody like you to help them to protect themselves and to move forward. You are a good friend in so many ways. But that's not what you're asking. You're asking for some advice on a matter that I have some answers that you may not like very much. But Anne, let's get to you first. How are you feeling about this one?
Yeah, I mean, this sounds like a lot to go through as Benji, but also as like a friend to Benji, someone who's trying to support Benji. I think when someone's in an abusive relationship, it can often feel like an endurance race, right? That like you want to stand by them and support them and be there so that they know that there is something to leave to, right?
Mhm.
Like that is
Yeah.
always the advice that you hear about how to support your friend in an emotionally or physically abusive relationship is like, you cannot personally like extract them from that relationship. What you can do is be the safe landing place, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Both
Absolutely.
in terms of your friendship and in a way forward, all like financially, all these sorts of things, and reiterate that again and again. And it
Mhm.
seems like the letter writer has done all of these things to the best of their ability.
Yes.
And I think, like you, the hard thing is that I think that Benji, like there were so many things that Max said to Benji that probably he couldn't stand up for in any capacity.
Yeah.
Right? Like he couldn't stand up for himself, let alone his friends, because of the way that the power dynamic was working. And we don't know how much shame, how much anger, sadness, like all these sorts of things that are going on. But I think right now, I think still focusing on the recovery from that relationship and on future ways that maybe fat phobia is expressed is the important way to look, instead of here are these things that happened while you were in this relationship that hurt me.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. You were reading my mind. And because, yeah, just a second, what you said, when an abuser is breaking down a victim the way Benji was broken down, there's such a loss of confidence, not even being able to defend themselves, much less defending anyone else, including close friends. And in some cases, this may sound ugly and complicated, but sometimes it's even a relief when the abuser's vitriol is actually directed at someone who's not them. Sometimes it's just a little break, like, yeah, go ahead and say terrible things about someone else instead of me just for a moment so I have a breather here.
Yeah.
And when the victim is working on gathering the strength to leave, you know, they also, this is also a little complicated, but they may tell a trusted person like you, letter writer, about the terrible things their abuser said about them because they're trying to get you on their side. So Benji may have told you what Max said about you, to try and get your confidence, to try and say, even if you don't care about what I've been going through, because I know I'm an unlovable loser, because I know that I deserve to be hit and monitored and treated like crap, please be on my side because he also said bad things about you. That's something that abuse victims sometimes do because they're just frequently not able to see their own value, but they value you so much that they're trying to show, like, even somebody like you who's so wonderful, he said bad things about you too. Will you help me out of this? Will you help me? So there are a lot of layers here to what Benji was going through and why Benji may not have stood up for you and in the face of fat phobia here. And I'm not saying any of this, by the way, as an excuse. I'm just saying it to hopefully give context to the situation and explain some of the reasoning or psychology that Benji was possibly going through. Because abuse doesn't make us behave to the best of our abilities. Abuse puts us in survival mode, and the way we survive isn't always in the best possible way, where we're treating everybody as well as we should.
Yeah. And the other thing about fat phobia, and I think letter writer probably knows this because they say that they've been working to unpack fat phobia themselves, right, in their own thinking, is that it is incredibly difficult to always identify all the places where it pops up, right? And then also to unlearn that line of thinking. And so, like, that incredibly complex work is happening, or you want, like, that's the sort of thing that you want to be happening. And then also, you have all of this, like, recovery work from being in an incredibly, incredibly abusive relationship that was incredibly difficult to leave because of all the different ways that the two people were enmeshed financially and locationally and all of these different things, right? And so, if you want to do that, that differently complex work of having these conversations about fat phobia, like I think they can't be together, right? Like
Yeah.
you don't want to have those signals muddled in a way that might actually, I think, make the fat phobia conversation seem less important, because any conversation where the two different things are mingled, the the conversation about the abuse is always going to take the forefront, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And so if you talk more, if like you have different conversations, maybe now, maybe in a couple months, that say, and you look at a specific thing that happened in the relatively recent, like, hey, this is just an example of something that makes me feel bad about myself.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I am happy to talk more about why this makes me feel bad and how I've tried to like identify this in my own life. But maybe we could talk about that a little. And also like switches the focus from like, here's a thing you did bad to like another thing that you're doing bad, another way that you're fucking up your life
Mm-hmm.
to, hey, here's something about me that like I'm vulnerable in this way. Can we maybe talk about a way that we don't do that anymore, or how I'm working on that and how I'd love for you to work on it with me?
Yeah. I think that is such a compassionate, caring way to frame this conversation. And it's also forward-looking because I don't think that we should be litigating the past in this situation, letter writer, at least not now. Now is not the time for that, and possibly never is the time for that.
Mm-hmm.
But the real issue here that you're hurting over is anti-fatness from your friend, and you don't want your friend to put that on you. And
right.
your friend, most recently, this most recent incident, when you pointed it out, your friend deleted the fatphobic tweet. Your friend didn't apologize. Benji absolutely should have apologized. But, hopefully going forward, that won't happen again. But I agree with you, Anne. It may be a conversation still worth having. Like, I walk through the world where this is something that is socially acceptable to hurl at me, and it hurts. And it's one of the last, prejudices that is constantly used as a punchline on TV, in songs, and pop culture. It's still acceptable in so many ways. And I just want you to know how much it hurts me when people laugh along with it or retweet it or whatnot. And, nip it in the bud when it happens. And the hurt is real. I don't mean to minimize your hurt in any way in saying that other incident with Mac, shouldn't be litigated now. I know that did hurt. But again, I think we should focus on the present and going forward as much as possible here. All right, we are going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll be reading more of your letters. Stay with us.
Bored with your boring cardio? Stop pedaling that snooze cycle to Nowheresville and try some cardio that's actually fun. Supernatural fitness, available on MetaQuest. Isn't that right, Jane Fonda?
Cardio will never be boring again.
Sweat to the beat of thousands of chart-topping songs inside stunning virtual landscapes.
Bet your stationary bike can't do that.
Visit GetSupernatural.com and join the next fitness revolution. Supernatural VR Fitness, only on MetaQuest. Rated T for Teen.
Build a routine with Ollie that supports your wellness needs, like getting your daily vitamins and minerals with Ollie's multi-gummies, or keeping your mood upbeat with all the vitamin D in Hello Happy. Give your gut health some support with probiotics, and wake up feeling refreshed after taking Ollie Sleep. Do wellness on your terms. Find Ollie at a Walmart or Target near you, or at ollie.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Oh, it's such a clutch off-season pickup, Dave.
I was worried we'd bring back the same team.
I meant those blackout motorized shades.
Blinds.com made it crazy affordable to replace our old blinds.
Hard to install?
No, it's easy. I installed these and then got some for my mom. She talked to a design consultant for free and scheduled a professional measure and install.
Hall of Fame son.
They're the #1 online retailer of custom window coverings in the world.
Blinds.com is the GOAT.
Go to Blinds.com for 40% off site-wide. Blinds.com. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Dear Prudence. I'm Kristen Meinzer, sitting in for Janae, and I am here with the great Anne Helen Petersen to answer your letters. The next one is titled Hurting.
I wanted to update our house for a decade, but we couldn't just in case my husband's kids wanted to move back in. His youngest just turned 24 and moved to New York, so I convinced him it was time. Our house went from 4 small bedrooms to 3. We have an actual master bedroom now, with a walk-in closet and ensuite. The second bedroom doesn't have a closet now, and we were using it as a home office when my 30-year-old stepdaughter, Jill, and her 2 girls got kicked out by yet another boyfriend. Jill has always been unstable and committed to causing chaos and dragging everyone along with it, especially her 2 daughters. Both fathers are now in jail. Her parents have tried time and time again to get Jill help, either with doctors or schooling, only for Jill to return to her old ways. My husband was convinced that Jill was finally seeing the light because she managed to keep a job this year and was very concerned about keeping the girls in this school district. We took out the office and squeezed twin beds in with built-in storage and a dresser for the girls. Jill pays $500 in rent. All other bills are paid by us. Jill is supposed to be saving for her own place. All she does is spend money on junk. It is a constant battle to keep our house from looking like a hoarder house. The girls have multiple bins filled with plastic toys that they might play with once. They have clothes that still have the price tags on them. Jill is coming back from shopping, it seems like every other day. The floor of their rooms can't even be seen. Then, my husband tripped over yet another abandoned toy and damaged his knee. He will need surgery and is currently in a wheelchair and on temporary disability. I put my foot down. I told Jill the free ride is over. She's going to pay for food and utilities, and we're purging all this crap cluttering our house. She got in my face and screamed that this was my fault for daring to remodel the house. I laughed and told Jill she was welcome to leave at any time. This is my house. My name's on the mortgage. If she wanted me to play the Wicked Witch in front of the girls, I wouldn't hesitate. If she bought more crap, it would be returned or tossed in the trash. Jill ended up taking the girls to her mother, leaving them on her doorstep, and disappeared for a whole week. Her mother got CPS involved. My husband is distraught over this and blames me for setting Jill off. I'm just tired of this. This has been going on for months. It isn't good for us, and it isn't good for the girls. I tried to stay back because I only came in on the scene when the youngest was 14, but we can't live like this.
This is tough. Ugh. Letter writer, this is awful. All of this is awful. I feel so bad for your grandkids. I feel bad for your stepdaughter. I know you're not feeling bad for her right now. I feel really bad for you. I feel bad for your husband who's in a wheelchair right now. This is just a mess all around. I also feel bad for your stepdaughter's mother, by the way, who had to get CPS involved. All of this is maddening, upsetting, and a lot of lives are in the balance in this scenario. This isn't just about remodeling a room. This is about a lot of lives being affected in potentially really disastrous ways. So, oh boy, I am feeling for all of you right now. And what about you? What are your initial reactions here?
Yeah, I don't think it's about remodeling at all, obviously. But that seems to actually be a symbol of something much larger, right? So
Yeah.
the letter writer came on the scene when the youngest stepdaughter was 14. We hear that at the end of the letter. And I think oftentimes when someone enters into a family dynamic that's already established, a family home, right? Like there are systems in place, there are relationships between kids and both parents that are like those patterns are there. 14 years old or older, like there are patterns there. And there are dynamics, especially if the parents split up maybe a couple years before, like it's a really difficult time to grapple with parents splitting up or with a new parent entering into the fray. And I think that remodeling the house to the letter writer seemed like, oh, this is now we are free to some extent of these patterns. Like I get to change the house in a way that will work, that will allow me to take up space in this house. And instead, you remodel the house and then those old behaviors and those old patterns literally come back to the house, right? And change like revert the dynamics to probably some very old ones and some ones that have probably made the letter writer, I think, feel out of control, without agency in their lives, right? And so now the letter writer has tried to put some boundaries on the behaviors that are acceptable in this home, tried to regain some of that control, and it's resulted in disaster. And so I think I think the letter writer probably understands how tragic this is and how difficult it is, especially for the kids.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's not acceptable. It's not okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Boundaries are important, but how the boundaries are decided upon and laid out, it sounds like that was completely lost in this entire scenario here. I'm sure you know this, letter writer, but the general rule of thumb, family therapists, psychologists tend to agree on this. It's not the stepmom's job to lay down the law. It is the parent's job, meaning your husband. And you and your husband could have and should have absolutely, from the get-go, sat down and made a plan of how are we going to handle this? How are we going to handle daughter moving in? What kinds of ground rules are we going to have if and or when things don't go according to plan? How is that going to be managed and dealt with? And how is that news going to be delivered? And that news and those boundaries should have been delivered by your husband, not by you, and not through a screaming match, and not in front of the children who had to witness that. This is his job as the father in this family. And you sitting with him while he delivered that news in a supporting role is one thing. It's quite another for you to deliver it on your own. And so that was a major misstep. I know we can't fix the past, but going forward, I think that you and your husband need to make a plan on how you can communicate better and how you can make a plan going forward. And maybe your plan is going to be devised by sitting down with a family therapist and or sitting down with your husband's ex. And maybe it's you, your husband's ex, and a therapist all together talking about what's going to work best here. How are the kids going to be cared for, the grandkids? How is this daughter, who's clearly got a lot of struggles? It sounds like she's really struggling with her mental health here. She's, acting out through, shopaholic behaviors, through other erratic behaviors, through blaming others for things. It sounds like she's really in a lot of pain and self-medicating through unhealthy ways. And shopping absolutely is a way that people self-medicate that is not healthy. And if there are a bunch of piles of crap all over your house with the price tags still on them that are actually tripping hazards and hurting people, that is a bad coping mechanism. That's not okay. So, if you can all sit down and come up with a plan, how are these grandkids going to be taken care of? What is everybody comfortable doing or not doing? Also, those two fathers that are incarcerated right now, are there extended family members of those fathers who want to be part of this conversation too about how these kids are going to be taken care of? Because that's their grandchild too, or niece or nephew or whatnot. And who can step in and make sure these kids are going to be okay? I feel so bad for these grandkids. I just feel absolutely terrible for them.
Well, and if CPS is involved, I think actually there probably is a mandated conversation that is either already happening or happening in the future about what that care is going to look like. I think too, if these piles of stuff all over the house, like this is the daughter's way, whether she realizes it or not, of reclaiming the space, right? And also of claiming a space as her own, because it's complicated to move into a house that is not your own with a step parent who you might have a fraught relationship with. But then also I think that like the dad, the husband in this situation is enabling it, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Like
yes.
and I see this so often where like you just like a parent just wants their kid to be better, to be happy, to be in a good situation, all of these things, right? So like whether that's trying to get them on their feet in different ways, funding a new idea for school, like we have that referenced in the letter that there have been previous attempts to try to help out. And in this case, it seems to say, okay, just move into the house. We'll make it work. Right. But there also seems to then be a breakdown in communication between the husband and the letter writer, and then the husband and the daughter, right? Like there's just not clear expectations being sought in any way. And probably, as is often the case in situations like this, he feels helpless and some amount of shame and scared.
Yeah. Yeah. And unfortunately, letter writer, you've had to deal with the situation because he's not stepping up beyond his shame and dealing with this stuff. He should be moving beyond his shame and just having to have the tough conversations, having to make the tough decisions. He's not doing that, but hopefully in therapy and, in some of these other sit downs with CPS, that accountability will happen. It needs to happen at some point. Clearly, your marriage is not feeling like a safe, happy place for you right now in the midst of all this. And, even though I have repeatedly said I have so much empathy for these little grandkids, I even feel bad for Jill, the stepdaughter who is causing you so much trouble right now. I also feel bad for you, letter writer, and I really want your husband to do better here. If your husband steps up, it's going to get better for everybody in this scenario. So anything you can do to try and facilitate that through therapy, through tough conversations and so on, please work on that. Also, just a logistical thing here. You mentioned that the mortgage is in your name for the house. Your name is on the mortgage. I'm not sure if that means your husband's name is also on the mortgage. I don't know if it's just your name. But I might want to talk with your husband now about protecting your assets too. Because if your husband is trying to constantly buy off solutions for his troubled daughter and that he's rescuing her in ways that are affecting your financial security, I would just stay on top of that too. I think that's really important. I know it's not a fun conversation, but logistically, money is important for our survival in this world. So please make sure your money is protected here.
The last thing I would say is, and this is true, in my general philosophy about when you write in for advice to something like this, is that you just want to have like how screwed up things are. You want that to be legible to people. You're like, can you please validate that this is not an okay situation? Because maybe other people in your life, like maybe the husband is like, no, we can make this work, right? And we're here to say, yeah, this is not okay. So where do we go from here, right? Like, how do we actually try to change some of the patterns that are in place?
Yeah. And you can change them. We know you can. And it's not going to be easy. This is a really, really tough situation. And we're feeling for you and we're sending the best to you, letter writer. Well, Anne, those are all the questions we have for this week. Oh my gosh, it's been harrowing, but also it's been fun tackling these with you, Anne. You're so smart. You're so compassionate. And it's just been a joy having you here. Where can our listeners find more of your work?
The best way is to find my newsletter, Culture Study. You can just Google my name, Anne Helen Petersen, and Culture Study. And then also the Culture Study podcast, which is available everywhere that you get your podcasts.
Yes, listeners, be sure to check that out. And if you like culture, also check out my podcast, The Daily Fail, where my friend Maura and I do comedic close readings of the tabloids. It's a different kind of study in culture, you might say. Listeners, do you need help getting along with partners, relatives, coworkers, and people in general? Write to Prudie. Go to slate.com/Prudie. That's slate.com/PRUDIE. The Dear Prudence column publishes every Thursday. Dear Prudence was produced this week by Vic Whitley-Berry and Maura Currie, with editorial help from Paola De Verona. Daisy Rosario is senior supervising producer, and I'm your guest, Prudence Kristen Meinzer. That's all for this episode, but join us on today's episode of Prudie Plus, where Anne and I answer a question about another very complicated family dynamic. Oh boy, it's complicated, causing extreme fights. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts by clicking Try Free at the top of your show page, or visit slate.com/Prudie Plus to get access wherever you listen. The episode is available for you to listen to right now. We'll see you there.